Link, are you ready? Link?
Yes, sir. The recording has started now.
Okay, thank you very much, and I'll go ahead and start. It is now 10 a.m. The budget workshop and special meeting of the Lone Star College System Board of Trustees is being called to order. Trustee Saldivar, will you lead us in the pledge to the American flag?
Yes.
Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United
States of America,
and to the
to the republic for which it
which
stands,
stands one nation,
nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much, and welcome to all this morning. Dr. Head, have we posted the notice of the workshop and the special meeting?
Yes, it's been posted in accordance with the law.
Thank you so much, Dr. Head. At this point, we will convene the budget workshop. And Helen, do we have anyone wishing to make public comments?
Chair Smith, we did not have anybody sign up today.
Okay, thank you so much. At this point, I'm going to ask Dr. Head to kick us off with the review of the recommended 2020 through 21 budget.
Sure.
Dr. Head.
Thank you. So thank everyone for joining us today. But so this undoubtedly has been the most challenging 5 months in my 37 years at Lone Star. And it's especially true as we've worked on the budgets under very trying circumstances. I wanted to thank the presidents and the vice chancellors and their staff. There's a lot of work that has gone on to put this together. And then the CFO, Jennifer Mott, and her staff. We have worked on this actually for months and a lot of changes. So the review today consists of two parts. I have a very short overview of the system, and we changed it a little bit. And normally there's quite a bit of information, but we've been giving that to you. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about where we're generally headed, and we're headed generally. And then secondly, Jennifer will go into detail about our expenditures, how we compare to our peers, and the outlook for the next couple of years. Just a couple of quick comments. One, as I've noted in a number of emails, our fall registration numbers have been improving on a weekly basis to the point where we can provide some financial estimates, we think, with reasonable certainty. And we're in relatively good shape for FY21 and 22, but that's thanks to the decisions we've already made, including the freezes on budgets and hiring, and we've eliminated vacant positions. We have a 5% reduction in our budget and several other cost-saving measures. We are assuming a 5% cut in state appropriations for 2 consecutive years, and we have contingency plans for the return of the virus, and we even know what our outlays would be if a major hurricane hits the area. So we've got a lot going on with it. So we've been conservative in our revenue and budget estimates so that we can ensure that we can ride out the storm for another 2 or 3 years. It just depends on what's happening. In summary, I believe we've done everything we can at the moment to anticipate our need, provide services to our students, and taking care of our employees in a thoughtful, efficient manner. So again, a lot of work has gone into this. We try to be very thoughtful, and thank you. A number of you have sent notes about that we considered certain things, and we're trying to integrate that into our thinking. So, Link, if you can go to the next one.
Dr. Head.
Yes, sir.
Just a quick question. You mentioned a 5% state cut in the state budget.
Yeah.
Now that's for 2021 and 22, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, not for the coming year.
No, that's for, I'm sorry, I thought you were talking about FY. Yeah, we are thinking now if the state budget doesn't get any better, that they could in fact cut us for this coming year and the year after that. So we've budgeted for that in our thinking. It's about $3.9 million both years. So.
Okay, all right. Thank you. I want to make sure everybody understood that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Good question. So let me just, by the way, I've been doing informal. I reached out to area presidents and vice chancellors, and our enrollments are actually a little better than everybody else's now. If you've read those emails, we have 2 different ways of looking at it. One, we're up about 8%, and the other one, we're down about 8%. So somewhere they're going to merge as we get closer to registration. But for budgeting purposes, and Jennifer's going to talk about this, to be safe, because we have to take a look at the entire year, we're doing a -10. And we'll factor that in, and you'll see in a few minutes. So this is the system. This is not anything new, but we have other people, I know, watching what we're doing here, but we are one of the largest systems in the country. And you can see we have been growing. We are one of the fastest growing in the country also. So you might take a look down at the bottom and see how many employees we have. And we have about 2,800 full-time employees. And then these number of sections that we have, it's just amazing the size that we are and the complexities that we have. And thanks to our faculty, we've made the adjustments for the most part, moving online. We may have up to 75% of our classes online this semester. Next slide. I want to show you this, and the reason I'm putting this here is the ethnicity and the age make a difference in what our priorities are. For example, if we know that, and it really what we don't have down there, which some other time we'll give you another report about kind of socioeconomic, what the communities look like, because when we see these numbers, then we know we need to spend more time up front on financial aid and advising, mental health issues, counseling, and some of the things that you all have pointed out before. You might note in the under age 20, that makes a difference in the way we go about our business also. And then if we take a look at the other end, we are seeing more adult. This is from fall of 19. So once we get the report from fall of 20, which will not be until around the 1st of September, we'll be able to compare and see what's changing with us. My guess is right now that you're going to see more people, because of the way the economy is, more in that older age group coming back and trying to get an education. So, link. So this is the population growth. You've seen this before, but it's just worth taking a look at to see where we're growing. So the red and the green are our growth areas, and basically the areas that are not growing are on the outskirts of where we are. But there's where new developments are coming in. So we pay close attention to this. As I mentioned to you before, we have all the data. We know Links area has every piece of data from the high schools. We know, and the elementary schools, from all the ASTs. We know how many people are in the 1st grade, 2nd grade, 6th grade, 7th grade. And we know what we call it the penetration rate, but it's the rate of students, the percentage of students that are coming to us. And so we're looking at that over the long term. You know, we're taking a look right now. We know with the pandemic, things are changing a little bit, but that's what's in a pipeline for us. And our future looks bright. We'll get past this period, but it's going to be a new norm for us. And if you haven't had time to read the email, you can see some of the things that I sent to you about what I think are the priorities for us. Next one, link. Keep in mind that everything we do wraps around one of these major areas. This is part of our strategic priorities. And I mean, no matter what we're doing, it's about student success. And then you can see it on the academic and workforce. And of course, I say this, but we can't do anything if we don't get our money right. We can't do these other things. And the way we're able to get our money right and do the things we've been doing is really with our culture. And I cannot say enough about our employees. This has been very stressful on everybody. We know that. Whether you're at the college or you're in life, I know. I've got 4 children and 3 grandchildren, another one on the way, and a mother-in-law in memory care. So I know what the impact is from a variety of ways. So our employees have been very patient, very supportive, and so have our students, by the way. So we're working very hard to try to keep moving forward under these conditions. So next one, link. I think that's. So I'm going to turn this over to Jennifer. And Jennifer, we're going to show you some more detail of kind of where we stand, because we've had some questions before like where do we stand compared to everybody else? And you've seen this, but when we looked at this, I thought this is a really good review for the board. It's a really good review for me to see that we do a lot of comparisons with others just to make sure that we're kind of in where we want to be in certain areas and then in the median in other areas. So Jennifer, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Okay. Link, I know you switched this over to me. Does that mean I have to load up the presentation separately?
Yes, it does. Do you want me to just pass control over to you real quick and try that?
Yeah, if it's not too much of a hassle. Sure.
Okay, one second.
Sorry, everyone. I thought it'd be easier if I could click through the slides.
Okay.
Board, I
Okay.
think what we're learning is nothing's easy right now. No matter how many times we do WebEx, Zoom, telephone calls, nothing. It seems to be a different way of signing in, a different way of communicating.
Yeah.
I just know since I have quite a few slides, I didn't want to have to keep saying next slide. So
Yeah.
that's why I was hoping we could get this switched over for me to control.
You are brave.
This whole issue has helped me with my patience for what it's worth. I
Yeah.
used to like, okay,
Link, I do have the presentation if that's easier.
Okay, why don't you go ahead and load it up then, and I'll change the role over to you as presenter. One of those keys.
Link, am I set? Okay, now I'm presenter. Okay. Share. There we go. Share. Okay, everyone can see my screen now?
yes.
Yes.
Can you eliminate the side? We're seeing your entire view, Jennifer. In other words, we're seeing that slide and the next slide.
I think it's a correct statement that I was brave to try to do this because I'm not sure I know how to do that. There we go. Did that?
Yeah. Good.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you for your patience, everyone, and for me getting that switched over. And also, good morning and thank you, everyone. I do have quite a bit that I'd like to get through, but of course, I do want to start with just our financial responsibility. I've mentioned all of this before, but I'm going to keep mentioning it just because we definitely are all very proud of this. The Government Finance Officers Association, we have received this award in excellence in financial reporting for 15 consecutive years. This is an award on our annual financial report. Our newest one is the Government Treasurers Organization of Texas, an award for distinction in our investment policy. We just got this for the first time in March of 2019. It was also the first time we ever applied for this award. So definitely also very proud about this. So have to mention it. And then, of course, I do also want to, as Dr. Head already did, give a huge thank you to all of the teams out there. This budget calendar just gives everyone a sense, I think, of, yeah, what a different year this certainly is. Our entire budget calendar has been shifted a lot this year. This workshop presentation here, right, I'm typically presenting this to the board in early June. And right around now, if not, a little bit earlier, you would actually be receiving the budget detail book. But of course, with all of this going on, the more information we can have about what is actually occurring, the better. So all of this has been pushed back. Presenting this workshop here today And then August 13th, everyone will receive electronically the proposed budget report. So this is the full detail. It's about 100 pages long that everyone will get a week prior to the board meeting on August 20th, where the board will be asked to vote on this proposed budget. And you can see literally that same day, we then need to start loading the budget into our system because it has to be loaded by September 1st. So as everyone knows, this is definitely a very different year. And I mean, as always, there's always a thank you to everyone who's worked on this, but that's certainly more so this year. The financial planning team, human resources, marketing, the vice presidents of administration and their teams at all of the campuses, and in all of the system areas, those business managers and directors. Certainly everyone at cabinet touches this budget, but these teams in particular, I wanted to thank, and that is not to leave out anyone else who's also worked on this. This budget, it's always one of those things that touches probably most everybody. So definitely a large thank you there. Yes, so before I completely dive into the proposed budget, I feel like it's always good to just have a sense of where we are before I can really talk about where we're going. So these next several slides is showing us in comparison among the 50 community colleges in Texas. Now, a common theme that you're going to see in these slides is when I show our ranking on an aggregate basis, just because we are a large community college, it is often that we rank very high, surely by function by our size. But then I also try to show a lot of the metrics on a per unit basis so we can have more of an apples to apples comparison to where we stand in comparison to other community colleges, regardless of aggregate size. So that is a common theme throughout this slide. So first, starting with property taxes, since that is our largest revenue source, our tax base is strong and it's large tax base. So our taxable value is the 4th highest among all 50 community colleges. So you can see where we stand there. And this large tax base, of course, then translates also into our tax revenues, which is also the 4th highest among all the 50 community colleges. So I'm very thankful that we have this strong and large tax base. But again, as I said, looking at it on a per unit basis, our tax revenues as a percentage of that tax base, we are actually the 10th lowest. So this is just to show that where we, like I said, to kind of level the playing field in terms of size, where we stand with other community colleges in terms of what percentage of our tax base, we are the 10th lowest. And this helps translate for us into the 10th lowest tax rate as well. Now, on our tax revenues, I mean, because we do have this large tax base and can have this relatively large amount of tax revenues, we do have the 14th highest in terms of what percentage tax revenues comprise of our revenue. So 41% of all of our revenues come from taxes. So that does put us not at the top end, but definitely towards above the median of how much we rely on tax revenues as a source of revenue in our budget. So switching to student revenues and our tuition and fees. For the in-district tuition and fees, we are the 10th lowest. This was as of fall of 2009. But you can see there's a large section of these comparisons that's pretty flat. So even though we're the 10th lowest, we are actually pretty close to the state median in our in-district tuition and fees. In terms of out-of-district, there we are the 5th highest as of this past fall. And we are the 11th highest for the out-of-state and international tuition and fees. So that's revenues. Switching to expenditures, our expenditure picture. So to be honest, I didn't even include the chart here that shows our expenditures on an aggregate basis, because there we rank the 2nd highest. But again, as I mentioned, that's really just a function of our size. So really, I believe what is a more valuable picture of us is our expenditures per student. So this is expenditures per full-time student equivalent. So there we are the 21st lowest, which really puts us, again, pretty close to the state median, which the board did approve about 2 years ago, a board policy on budget goals. And one of those budget goals was for our expenditures per full-time student to be roughly the state median. So we have worked to increase this, right? We had been ranked lower. Last year we were ranked the 13th lowest. So we have increased this expenditure level per full-time student closer to the state median.
Jennifer, it's Mike Stoma. Would you remind me what the definition of full-time student equivalent is?
Yeah, so that basically assumes every student takes 12 credit hours. Now, certainly that isn't actually the case, but just so there isn't this variability between number of students and how many credit hours they're taking, it's per full-time student equivalent. So if every student took 12 credit hours, this is what the expenditures are per student.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Stoma, that's just a common measuring ground so that you compare apples to apples across the country. The average student for us is 9.2 or 3 or something like that hours. So
Right, I just couldn't remember what the standard was, actually.
So to arrive at that FTE, we would take the total number of credit hours students are enrolled in and divide by 12 to obtain the number of FTEs. Is that correct?
Yes.
yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, I know it's common to use on an employee side, you know, an equivalent of a full-time employee to aggregate full-time and part-time to do metrics on that side of the house. This is the same concept just for students, full-time student equivalent.
Jennifer, I have a question. You said earlier that 41% of our revenue comes from taxes. And
Yes.
we might not know the answer now, but have you heard any speculation on what's going to happen to the real estate market post COVID-19? I've heard some rumors, I don't know how official they are, that the real estate rates are going to drop substantially. And whether that's true or not, I don't know.
I don't know, you know, I have not heard anything, especially officially. A lot of the just sort of market reports I've tended to look at, it looks like residential is holding up okay. Commercial is certainly taking a large beating, and I would definitely expect there to be fewer new properties, new developments coming online. So, so in terms of forward looking, what I have put in for future growth rates is I haven't put in negative, but I have definitely lowered the growth rate. I mean, we've been this year, we have you'll see later slides, we have a 6% growth rate. So in general, we tend to have between 4 and 6%, but I have lowered that down to 2%. So it's still a positive growth rate, but I have been factoring in a lower growth rate than what we typically see. Because of that uncertainty.
Jennifer,
Okay.
Trustee Smith, we're not showing it today. We're not showing the 5-year plan today because it keeps changing, but we did put 2% in there
Okay.
for the following year. We actually had the discussion this week. And so trying to be conservative, very conservative, until we can all see exactly what happens here. So.
Okay. Thank you very much.
The next valuation will be on January 1, 2021.
Okay.
So we still have a few months before the valuations actually even take place.
Thank you.
Yes. So this is where we stand in terms of expenditures per full-time student equivalent. The next few slides now shows our expenditures by category, which this is the first time even I had kind of looked at this, and I actually found it very interesting because it really helps show where I think as a large college, we are able to get economies of scale, but also where Lone Star College has chosen to prioritize its resources. To go through this same metric, expenditures per full-time student equivalent by category. First is instructional costs. Now here we are the 8th lowest, and this is where I personally think we are seeing economies of scale in terms of why are we the 8th lowest, because as you'll see later on, it's 53%. So over half of our expenditure budget actually goes to instructional costs. So it's not like we're putting very little of our budget towards this. It's over half of our budget is towards instruction, but yet on a per full-time student equivalent basis, we are the 8th lowest. So my thought here is this is a demonstration of just the economies of scale that we are able to achieve as a large college.
We're going to come back on some of this. As we were preparing this, we were talking this week about exactly what that means. I mean, our focus clearly has been on providing services to students, thinking that we had the instruction. And I know, Trustee Good, we had this discussion even when you were the chair over those expenditures. So we're going to come back and give you some more detail on what those instructional costs to make sure that we've got our priorities right here. We think we do, but I just need more. When we were looking at this, we want some more definition over based on those NACUBO classifications. So.
Thank you.
Yes, and that's what you'll see here shortly. In public service costs here, we're the 12th lowest. We're pretty low here. This is in general a small category for us. This includes things like SBDC, our leadership and economic development department. But in general, this is a smaller area for us. But now where you can really see where we have prioritized resources is when you look at our academic support. I'll click back and forth, academic support and our student services. In these two categories, we're the second highest per full-time student equivalent in academic support. And this includes our libraries. It also includes D2L, our online support platform. It includes proctors and tutors. So here we're the second highest. And then sort of in a similar spirit, student services. So this is financial aid advisors, counseling and career advisors, admissions and student records. Here we're the 7th highest.
Jennifer, if I could add one thing, board, when we take a look at this, so, you know, we think we've had our percentage of full-time faculty and adjuncts, but these support services, if you take a look at the kind of the demographics and the educational background, what I'll just call the kind of the socioeconomic issues with our students, when we have that many students coming from that are underprepared at times, and we've got 40,000 students on financial aid. I mean, when you take a look at this, you can see what our priorities have been. These are all student support services. And because a lot of these students need that, I mean, they just need that assistance that we call them wraparound services. In Houston North, that's exactly what we were doing with Houston North. You're going to see in the budget recap in a minute. Last year, Trustee Pierce, we hired about 10 or 11 more CIS counselors to help with our with the student issues. So that's been our priority. Again, we'll go back and take a look at the instructional issues, but our priority clearly has been these support services.
Jennifer, so that I can understand, so the college is allocating $1,400 per full-time student. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, $1,400 per full-time student equivalent.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Right. So, I mean, the sheer number of students that we have, the actual head count is going to be a higher number than the full-time student equivalent. But yes, on that full-time student equivalent basis, it's $1,400 per student.
Jennifer, do you know how much money we're actually talking about?
So it's about, there's a later slide that shows it's actually about 16% of our aggregate budget that goes to student services. That percentage is the combined academic support and student services.
So it's about 80 or 90 million, something like that, somewhere in that neighborhood. So.
Yeah, so that's where I mentioned, like on an aggregate basis, instructional costs is still by far our largest cost at 53%. And it's 16% that goes towards these student services. So on an aggregate basis, that's what I thought was so interesting about these charts is on an aggregate basis, these are not our highest expenditures. But when you now look at this comparison of us among the 50 community colleges, on a per full-time student equivalent basis, it really shows that, at least in comparison to the other 49 colleges, we have prioritized academic support and student services at a higher level than many other community colleges here in Texas. So that was kind of one of the key things that I thought was so interesting about these charts.
Jennifer, Mike Stoma, do you have any metrics on utilization? In other words, it's one thing to allocate $1,413 per student. It's another issue to, another question to ask, are they utilizing to that level of investment? What's the utilization of student services per student?
I don't personally have that, and I don't have it
colleges
handy
have
here
that.
today.
We could get that for you. The colleges are keeping numbers on how many people come in and how many people utilize their services. So we'll follow up on that. So.
Yeah, I think it's a key metric I would look at, because it measures consumption, right? It also measures whether you're spending your money in the right place.
Yeah. Okay. Good question. Okay.
So that was the key takeaways I guess I wanted to share with these charts. There are 2 more expenditure categories, so just to show, institutional costs. So this is executive leadership, but this is also our safety and security. So our police force is included here. Here we are the 8th lowest. And then finally, for our operations and plant maintenance, which is our facilities maintenance, here we are pretty much right at the median, which I personally feel is a good place to be. I think it shows that we do consider it important to maintain our grounds and our facilities without sacrificing the other priorities. So here we are right at the median. So that just shows us, like I said, where we are in comparison to kind of get a sense of where are we currently. So I can now jump into our proposed budget and talk about where we want to go, at least for the next fiscal year 2021, which starts September 1st, 2020 and runs through August 31st, 2021. So first, just to lay out the assumption that we have included in this budget and included in the 5-year outlook. As always, we do our best to apply business principles and practices in everything that we do, and also remain very conservative in our estimates of revenue and expenses. And a first key example of that is we are assuming in this budget a 10% decline in student credit hours for fiscal year 2021. Now, if you look at even today's enrollment report, the decline was at about 8.5%. So as of right now, our decline is less than rather this 10% decline, but that's not a final number yet. So again, just to be conservative, we have built this budget on a 10% decline. And then thereafter, our assumption over each prior year growth assumption is 2%. Now, historically, we have assumed and seen about a 3 to 4% annual growth rate on a long-term average. So lowering this down to 2% is being more conservative in possible future growth. And again, that is off of each prior year's assumption. So with this decline, it's then a 2% growth off of that decline. So actually in a 5-year period, we have not even fully regained all of that 10% decline.
So just to make sure everybody knows where we are. So we budgeted what we think is kind of the worst case scenario. We're better than that right now. And there's 2, as I've noted in a couple of emails to you, there are 2 different charts that we look at. One's from the time we started registration, and the other one is to registration. So one of those is a minus 8.5. The other one is plus 7 or something like that. And those 2 charts will merge. It's just really tough to tell, but we're trending in the right direction. And I think we'll be somewhere between 0 and minus 5 before it's over with, but we can't tell. If we have another surge in the virus, then we could end up with the 10%. So we're kind of budgeting, and we're being very conservative. It's easier for us to come back right now than being too optimistic about things. So
Dr. Head, have you gotten any feedback from the other community colleges on what they are budgeting for in
Yes.
terms of enrollment? I'm
Yes.
just curious.
they're all down. As a matter of fact, I will send that to the board. I sent a note out yesterday to the chancellors and the presidents. We're in about the best shape of everybody, actually. Houston's down -25, just so you'll know. I got that note last night from the chancellor. So I'll send a note out once. I'm waiting on about 3 or 4 other area colleges, but most of them are down anywhere from about 8, like we are, to 30%. So we've gone all out trying to get students in. I will say that. I don't. We continue to do this. Yeah.
Yeah, sound like it. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, Jennifer. Sorry.
Okay, sure. No, thank you. So our other assumptions, of course, I mean, part of why we want to build conservative estimates is we do want to maintain that goal of keeping the AAA rating. We also have retained the goal of a 16 to 20% cash reserve. Now there, I mean, this year, as we've talked about in prior meetings, we've taken some very deliberate actions. We have a hiring freeze and we have a budget freeze on non-personnel expenses. So right now, our expenditures are only on essential spending. And so that has allowed us to build up an initial accumulation of our cash reserve. Right now, we are forecasting to end this current fiscal year 2020, so August 31st, 2020, we're forecasting our cash reserve to actually be 19.6%, which clearly is a very healthy cash reserve towards the top end of that goal. But like I said, that did not come pain free. In order to get that, we have, like I said, the hiring freeze and the budget freeze. But the hope is for this accumulation to allow us to ease in over a 1 or 2 year time period to ease into the expenditure adjustments that we're going to need to make. Once we see what the actual revenue decline is, right here we're assuming this 10%, but once we see what that actual revenue decline is, then we'll know much more specifically what total expenditure adjustments we need to make sure our revenues and expenditures remain in alignment. So having this accumulation allows us to have a cushion to take the time that we need to make those adjustments.
So, and we'll pretty well know where we stand after fall registration is over and classes start. So sometime after official day, which would be around September the 10th, something like that, we'll pretty well know what things look like.
So continuing the remainder of our assumptions, tuition and fees, right? I mean, here we are continuing to follow the board policy there. But of course, the key difference this year was that the board in this past March, had approved an increase in tuition and fees for in-district, out-of-district, and out-of-state for this coming fall of 2020. Of course, that was like 2 weeks prior to the pandemic hitting. So already from prior discussions with the board, these increases have been delayed. The increases for in-district tuition and fees has been delayed to fall of 2021 and delayed to spring of 2021 for out-of-district, out-of-state tuition and fees. We also are assuming a decline of 5%. This was already mentioned in the state funding. I know prior board meetings we had talked about this 5% reduction possibly happening now, this current fiscal year 2020. As we know, thankfully that didn't happen, but I think everyone can see that the state economy is still getting pretty beaten up. So we do still face this possibility even as early as 2021 fiscal year, which starts September 1st. So again, just to be as conservative as possible, we have built into this proposed budget a 5% decline in 2021 and another one in 2022 in our 5-year outlook. So those are the assumptions that sort of underlie this proposed budget. So to now go through the sources of funds that we have for this proposed budget, this shows you the shares, the percentage shares in each of our revenue sources. I've already mentioned property taxes is our highest at last year was 42%. This year we're forecasting that to be 43%. In this proposed budget, property taxes does comprise 46% of the proposed budget. Now, in the board policy, the goal is for us over a period of time to work towards equalizing the share of property taxes and student revenues. That was the goal discussed with the board, like I said, about 2 years ago when that board budget policy was passed. And we had been making slow progress towards that, reducing, not in aggregate, but in percentage, reducing property taxes, increasing the percentage of student revenues. Obviously here we are moving in the opposite direction, and that's really just a function of us assuming the 10% decline in enrollments and that 10% decline in student revenues. So that is moving in the opposite direction. But again, that board policy, I think that was also why we stated it as our goal. And we do still want that, I think, to be the long-term goal. But of course, we have to, along the way, adjust to just sort of the realities of this. So this proposed budget does have an increase in the property taxes share to 46%. So looking in more detail at those property taxes, in terms of the valuations, we are assuming a 6% growth rate in property values. Now those property values, the valuation was done January 1st, 2020. So to some extent, that's relatively final. I mean, we don't have the final reports from all of the appraisal district yet. But in terms of that growth rate, it is a pre-pandemic growth rate where we do already have initial estimates from all of the appraisal districts underlying where we got the 6% from. And so with that, this proposed budget does include keeping the tax rate flat at the 10.78 cents. And here you can just see the 15-year history of where our how our tax rate compares to the average tax rate. So the next largest revenue source to look at is student revenues. And of course, the main thing that you can immediately see here is this is where you see the assumption of a 10% decline in credit tuition. So this is where you can see that drop from 125 million down to 113 million in student revenues included in this proposed budget. Same thing on the state funds. I mentioned that we have included the assumption of a 5% decline. And so here in those bars, you can see also that decline, that 5% decline that is included in this proposed budget.
Jennifer, just to point out, the red is student success points, and that's the metric system that the state is using, that the legislature passed that. So they put money in the student success budget and have student success points. So internally, when we do normal budgets, we also have a performance metrics for our individual campuses, and they get additional money based on that. It seems like completing developmental English and moving up to the next level, or developmental math, and they're adding more factors in there, but that's the red piece of that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so of course I do have to talk about COVID-19 for a bit. We've talked about this, I think, at length in prior board meetings. So for this, I have just one slide just to show where we are in terms of costs. We have received $16.2 million in federal funds from the CARES Act. This is the institutional funds. So this does not include, there's another $14.4 million on top of this that we've received for direct aid to students that I have not included here. These are just the institutional funds that we have received, the $16.2 million. But then looking at our costs, I mean, this current year in FY 2020, of course, we immediately we started waiving distance learning fees. That's about 1.4 million. We have been giving refunds to for withdrawals due to COVID. Right now, that is about 750,000 this year. For next year's budget, I have estimated about 500,000 for that. Of course, the largest expense in all of this is the PPE and sanitization. So this current fiscal year, we have spent $6 million on that. And we do have supplies that will last into the fall. So that did minimize a little bit how much I had to put into the budget for next year. But for that, I have put in $7.5 million for PPE and sanitizations for the entire fiscal year in next year's budget.
Jennifer,
Yes.
it's pretty obvious to me why we would need to spend $750,000 on refunds for spring 2020 withdrawals, but it's not as obvious to me why we need to budget $500,000 for withdrawals next spring.
The thought was like, if a student is taking a course and actually contracts the virus, for example, and withdrawals due to that, and some of it is just wanting to have that flexibility. If if there's another big wave of this,
Okay.
just so we do have that option if we think that's something that's important for students to have.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, I would see that as
That's
a.
also why I budgeted less than the 750 that we had this year.
Okay.
Yeah, I would see that as a
Good
risk
question, Linda.
mitigation. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Mike, I missed it. I was talking. What did you say?
No, I would see this as a risk mitigation because quite honestly, there's a lot of unknowns going into 2021, right? About how this virus is going to spread or be treated. There's a vaccine. All that stuff is still unknown. So I see this as a risk mitigation possibility that could happen.
Oh, yeah, I agree with you.
Mhm.
Just for the board, because Trustee Stoma had brought this question up, and it's a good one. I mean, on the refunds, we have to be careful because of once we get credit for a student, then we can't give them a refund out of operating. So we have to find other dollars for that. Same thing with federal financial aid. And then the CARES Act was pretty specific in what we could use. Now, we think another one is coming and it won't be as specific. So after this was brought up, we're prepared to make some shifts. There's some things that we can spend out of operating, some things we can spend out of CARES, but we know, if the virus returns, then we're going to have we have more refunds. We feel like that's the fair thing to do to students. So.
Sure.
Okay, so then of course there are other COVID-related expenses. Our cost of our online learning platform went up, for example. We took on more costs for proctors. So that's $1 million that we spent this current year. And then Link has also purchased computers for students, and that has been $4 million in purchasing computers out of the CARES Act funds. So in total, we're just over 21 million in costs. Now, I do want to note, right, this does not include the revenue impact of the decline in enrollments, which is about another 12.5 million. But in terms of just the actual cost of our expenditures, we are at 21 million, which of course is over the 16.2 million that we've received so far. So that shortage of $5 million is what I have included in the FY 2021 operating budget. In this proposed budget is that 5 million shortage. So getting into the detail of the budget, this slide and the next slide is by far, I think, the most dense slides that we have. But just to show the revenue budget, what I wanted to show here is, right, in this current fiscal year, we had started this year budgeting 392 million in revenues. With everything that has happened right now, we are forecasting that we will end at 386 million in revenues. So of course we have an initial decline in revenues just in this current fiscal year in the revenues received being less than what we had estimated. And then of course, like I said, with the 10% decline in enrollments being the largest piece, estimating a further decline in revenues in FY 2021. So the proposed revenue budget is 377 million. And so down below that is where I've sort of itemized what comprises this change in revenues. Again, the largest piece being the 12.5 million coming from the 10% decline in enrollment growth. You see there's nothing here for increases in tuition because, as I mentioned, we've delayed that. There's about 500,000 from the out of district fees going up, that delayed to spring. So that is about, from student revenues, a total of 16.5 million decline in the decline we've already experiencing this current year, plus the additional decline we're estimating in 2021. That is thankfully offset by that property tax growth of 6%. That's an additional 9 million that can offset some of that. But then, as already mentioned, the 5% decline in state revenues, that's 4 million. And then we do have a decline in miscellaneous revenues, which is our auxiliary revenues, our bookstores, investment rates of return on our cash pool. So that's another 3 million in revenue decline. So on a net basis, total revenues are estimated to decline by 14.6 million from what we had budgeted in the FY 2020 year. Now we can thankfully offset that in some with our expenditure budget. Right, we had this year budgeted 392 million, about 3.3 million of that was in one-time expenses, not recurring expenses. So by taking that off of what is our recurring expenditure budget, that is an offset to these decline in revenues of 11.3 million, or of 3.2 million, I'm sorry. So in summary, the bottom line of this is in terms of what new resources do we have to work with in building the FY 2021 budget. Normally here I have a positive number. Of course, this year it is a negative number. So we have, on a net basis, 11.3 million fewer resources to work with in building the FY 2021 expenditure budget. So here is that expenditure budget. So the main thing here is the final expenditure budget proposed is 380 million. Now, what you can see here in this area of sort of recommended budget changes, there are still budget additions, right? There's always going to be things that cost increase sort of outside of our control. Insurance costs for property insurance, that cost did go up. We did have new facilities coming online. And of course, we did also have new initiatives and new programs in the works that had already been started and committed to prior to COVID hitting. So we do have budget additions. Like I said, things that were already in the works and too far into it to undo. So then we have had to make budget reductions, both to offset these additions, but also to offset the actual decline in resources available, that 11.3 million. So there we have the 5% budget reductions that everybody made, and we have another almost 13 million of reductions that I will detail more in a couple slides later. So on a net basis, we have reduced the expenditure budget by $8 million. Now, this also doesn't include pay raises for employees, right? That is something we are not doing, and that is not included in this FY 2021 proposed budget, and an assumption of a continued hiring freeze and a continued budget freeze. So we have reduced expenditures by 8 million. Now, if you remember, just from the prior slide, we had 11.3 million though in fewer resources. So this does mean, and this is part of the purpose of accumulating that cash reserve. This proposed budget does include a use of cash reserves of 3.4 million. That's this number right down here. I do want to note that Just shy of half of that is actually coming in the student activity fee fund. Now that fund does have a balance in it currently of 1.4 million. And legally, we are not allowed to use those funds for anything else. So because we had that balance, I think this discussion has been already had with the board that we can waive, and we are going to waive the student activity fee for the fall semester and allow that fund balance to continue to support the expenditures in that fund. So that does allow us to give that relief to students in that student activity fee while still maintaining student activities by using that fund balance. So that is about half of this. It's about 2 million that is actually acting as a cushion for our operating expenditure budget. Okay, so as we get into some more detail on this expenditure budget, I mentioned the showing, a lot of this I've actually already mentioned. Our instructional cost in the aggregate is 53% of over half of our budget does go to instruction. And I had 16%, it's 15% going to student services. So this is the categories on the aggregate basis of our expenditure budget. And then to go through in more detail those budget changes. So this just shows for the budget additions only, what strategic priority those budget additions are towards, 40% of it being towards culture. So just to go through where we do have budget additions, new facility funding, right? We have had new facilities coming online last year and this year. And of course, that's all been in the works for years now. So funding those new facilities still needs to happen. As I already mentioned, some of our costs, even outside of what we're paying for with CARES Act, our cost for instruction online has gone up. So we're adding resources there. We have the bachelor's program coming online this fall. So adding resources there. Under culture, that's where you see the $5 million for COVID-19, PPE, sanitizations, and sort of just a COVID contingency is that $5 million there. The compression, that 2.5 million, so that was something actually approved by the board in this current year's budget of FY 2020. The budget had approved in total $5 million in pay increases for employees that was implemented March 1st. So that mid-year implementation, as mentioned when we proposed last year's budget, half of that cost was in 2020, $2.5 million. The other half of the cost does hit 2021. So this is a cost that was already committed to. In addition to that, I already mentioned our property insurance costs have gone up, and a good portion of that is also due to new facilities, new square footage having to be added to that insurance policy. Facilities management costs, those have just gone up. Our revenue bond payments went up $300,000 this year. Under student success, right? We are continuing the Houston North Initiative, adding the additional funding there. Dr. Head also already mentioned communities and schools, so that funding is here. So in total, we do have 18 million in budget additions, and these are all items that in some form or another had pretty much already been committed to prior to COVID hitting us. But of course, we made budget reductions to offset that and offset the reduction in overall revenues. So all campuses made a 5% budget reduction. So that's 8.6 million total, and you can see 3 million of that is in salaries and benefits from eliminating vacant positions. Same thing for system office, a 5% reduction there as well. And same thing, a lot of the strategy there was to eliminate vacant positions. In total, we've eliminated 50 vacant positions out of 218 that had been vacant at the time that we reviewed this. So that's about 14 million total in this 5% budget reductions. Other budget reductions that we have made, vacant position savings, right? So for example, out of the 218 roughly currently vacant positions, 50 of those are being eliminated. But another, it's 82 positions have been put on hold. So we're not eliminating them, but they are not being approved. They are still going to be under a hiring freeze. So that and any other sort of natural attrition, there's going to be savings from vacant positions. So we are including savings from that. It's a very conservative assumption of $6.5 million savings from that hiring freeze. We're also doing a one-time reduction to R&R, that's repair and replacement. And then as in prior years, we are completing or continuing the North Harris adjustment. Now, I will mention there, since they were already working on this adjustment to their expenditures, for that reason, they were not included in the 5% budget reduction, so they didn't take a double hit in 1 year. But so this is how we identified another 13 million in reductions and offsets. So that allowed us to identify 27 million total in reductions to offset both the budget additions that were already in the works and to offset the decline in revenues. So finally, to kind of wrap all that together, the revenue budget and the expenditure budget, this is the picture of where we estimate reserves to be based on this proposed budget that we've built. As I mentioned, we are having this accumulation of the cash reserves this year because we've had the hiring freeze and the budget freeze. So we're forecasting to have 19.3% as of August 31st, 2020. So then that gives us that healthy cushion going into this 21 budget. And I showed where we are using some cash reserves in that 21 budget. So, but that does still have us staying healthy at an 18.3% forecasted reserve percentage ending 2021. Again, I mean, that is still coming at the expense of having no pay increase this year, continuing hiring freeze for many of our positions, continuing budget freezes. So still trying to keep that cushion there so we can get into the year and see what the actual outcomes of everything is, where our revenues land, and then be able to make the necessary adjustments to expenditures to make sure we keep ourselves in alignment going forward. Okay, so this and the next slide, it's repeats from everything I've just gone through, but I know I just went through a lot. So just wanted to end with just a quick summary and highlights of all of the detail I just went through. On the revenue side, right, the full net decline in revenue is 14.6 million. I mean, but that does include a $9 million increase in property taxes, small $500,000 coming from tuition and fees for out of district, out of state. I did want to just remind everyone of the delay in the in-district tuition increase. So there are no new revenues coming there from an increase. But of course, student revenues overall declining by 10% due to enrollment decline. And then $4 million decline in our state revenues. And again, wrapping up kind of the summary for the expenditure side, we have an 11.2 million net reduction in expenses, both by removing the one-time expenses in this current year's budget, plus the additional 8 million in actual expenditure reductions. But with that, right, we still have added to the budget that 5 million for COVID expenses. We've added the other half of the pay, new facilities. Like I said, this is just in the summary of everything that I've gone through. And of course, the budget reductions, vacant position savings as offsetting reductions.
So Jennifer, and for the board, I just want to make sure you know that we're not counting on another stimulus. We're we think it's going to happen, but who knows when it's going to happen. So COVID expenses, some of the, and if our enrollments get better between now and the time we improve the board, we're giving you what we think. We're trying to be very cautious with this. So going into the semester, I mean, if we pick up the second stimulus money, then that offsets those COVID expenses, we think, for the most part it would. So just keep that in mind, that what you're seeing is, for us, it's kind of the worst case scenario.
I'd rather be pleasantly surprised than bitterly disappointed.
Same here. Yeah, so certainly, I mean, if there is a CARES Act Part 2 that provides us additional institutional funds, one of the first things that can pick up is this $5 million of COVID expenses. I mean, that alone would eliminate our use of cash. So I think there are, I mean, also with the enrollment, 10% enrollment decline, I definitely think there are places we built in where we can be hopeful for positive surprises. But we've built this proposed budget without very many, like any positive surprises built in. So just in closing, just want to quickly share our calendar of now what happens from here. This budget workshop being the overall summary of the proposed budget that we are building. And then I've already mentioned the full detail, like that 100-page budget book will be electronically released to everybody on August 13th. So everyone will have it for a week prior to the board meeting on August 20th. And that's when the board will be asked to vote on this proposed budget. At that same meeting, the board needs to propose the tax rate and set our public hearings. And then, so there will be dates for public hearings on the tax rate, at least one in September, and then adoption of the tax rate. So in terms of actually what needs to happen here to adopt our budget and adopt the tax rate, this is the timeline from here.
Has there been any indication from the taxing entities that there could be a delay in estimated valuations because of the impact of COVID on their workforces?
No, we have not received any notification. No. And we should know pretty soon. We're expecting to receive the certified value reports here in early August.
Okay.
Trustee Sullivan, have you heard anything to the contrary?
Haven't. HCAD sent a letter out to jurisdictions recently that they will meet the deadline, although the deadline provides for some extension into the future. However, HCAD still has to provide an estimate to the jurisdictions.
Yeah.
It just won't be certified.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, board members, any other questions? It's your time to shoot questions at Jennifer. She's done a great job putting the data together.
Can
So,
you back to the calendar?
I'm sorry, what did you say?
Can we back up, I think it's one slide to the timeline?
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I
perfect.
do have a question.
Who was that with the question?
Me, Art, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, my question, Jennifer, has to do with any projections in terms of technological equipment, in terms of, I know that, every day things change and I know we're still working through the challenges. I mean, everything's out of the box, I hate to use that overused term, but the way we do things, but, and I know Dr. Head alluded to difficulty every time we kind of try to do these meetings. And fortunately, I've seen it improving. Believe it or not, it's gradually getting better. And I'm just referring to this one particular part, right? The virtual meetings. But I know that, I mean, I'm just wondering, I'm just curious, I guess. I'm wondering whether there's going to be any investment required in terms of just improving that whole setup and you know, and in terms of securing software and, you know, stuff like that. Is that going to be a urgent need anytime soon? Just a general question.
Well, so that is where I think in some of the budget additions, you saw, I think it was just shy of $1 million being added to online instruction to make sure we have additional resources there, since so much of our classes here in the fall will be online. So we are making sure that there's additional resources there. And then, of course, I don't know if this falls in the category of technological, but the PPE equipment alone, of course, you've seen the significant amount of resources being devoted to that, to the PPE equipment, to the kiosks that check people as they come in, to sanitizing our buildings. We're working towards a contract to have a fixed schedule of sanitizing all of our buildings every weekend. So in terms of expenses going towards sort of the new environment, that's where we have additional resources.
If you're referring to instructional, yes, we are taking a look at new technologies and how that would be. That's part of the.
No, and I appreciate that. That is very important.
Yeah.
But I was also referring in terms of business equipment for inner administrative staff and everybody, because like what we're doing here. I mean, well, this is virtual, right? Meeting, like it
Sure.
falls under.
Let us get you a report over that, because we've taken a look at Zoom. Link's been working on some of that. It's very expensive, by the way, for the licenses for our size. So let us get a report, and I think you'll see.
Challenges I myself face it. My work,
Yeah.
and having to work with my staff and other folks.
Yeah, we'll get you
Okay.
something together there. So
Can you hear me?
Dr.
yes, sir.
This is Ken Lloyd. With the COVID changes and the need for different types of skills, what sort of money do we have? Or, for example, I had an opportunity to go to Freeport, and one of the things that Bradford College is doing is they're emphasizing welding. So they're gearing up for that. What are we doing for those type of opportunities? Do we have any extra money set aside, or are we really going to be pushing? And then I have a lot of people that are asking me questions about the best opportunity. And at this time, I'm looking at mechatronics. How many are we prepared to increase our mechatronics classes or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, so the colleges have been given a green light to add whatever sections they need to add. We'll have money in the reserves in the contingency account as we go in. So all the presidents know, do not shortchange on student sections, especially on the workforce piece or any other piece. So I think we'll meet whatever need is there. They know that they have budgets for adjuncts or full-timers, but if they need more money, they just need to let us know, and we'll provide all that. So, and yeah, we have mechatronics at University Park and at North Heroes. So, and I can't tell you what the enrollments are right now. We'll get that for you, but I think we're going to be fine in our workforce. I mean, the enrollments are down a little bit right now, and we expected that because of the face-to-face and the online piece. But I'll get you an update on. We have that by program where we are with our enrollments. So.
Yeah, and I attended a CTE event, and the question was asked, where are we with respect to how much students we can have with respect to the 4-year versus the 2-year in apprenticeship? What's the breakdown percentage of what we can handle?
Well, I guess I need a little more information over the apprenticeship issue, because we have been working with the Department of Labor over that, and we've had some grants over that. It depends on which area. I probably just need to talk to you offline about that, because it's a different setup for us here, because most of the people that we've been talking to that were interested in apprenticeships are down out of our service area. They're more in the petrochemical industry, which is out of our service area. That you're going to see more of that in San Jacinto and more of that in Houston Community College than you would up here. We have been actively engaged with our businesses up here about apprenticeships, and there's not a lot of interest in that piece up here. So when I say up here, up in our service area. So.
Dr. Head, one of the things, this budget is so impressive. I think it may be a good idea to post that proposed budget on the website.
Okay.
And I'm throwing that out. I'm not real sure there are any issues with doing that. If there are issues, just forget about the question. But if we can put it up on the website, I think that would be very valuable to everyone in the community to see what we're doing along those lines. And
sure, we'll get that.
Answer a lot of questions too.
Okay, we'll get that up on the website so that the public can see it.
Okay.
And then the budget detail too, that electronic release of that that will be posted as well.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, Mike Sullivan.
Go ahead, Mike.
Pardon me, thank you. I have two questions, and I'll direct these to Steve and Jennifer. One, looking at the budget line item for student success, I noted only North Harris listed, and it looked like 1.5 or 1.7 million dollars. So I'd like to see a breakdown of student success dollars for the other campuses, in particular Keywood. That's my first request. Second request, Steve, I've talked to you about this offline about associations dues. So I would like to see a list of the association dues being paid by the system office and by the campuses. I know you said that it will take time and people are not there. However, looking at the calendar for the budget, I don't see enough time for me to get the information and to prepare possible requests or amendments at the budget adoption meeting. So if you could address both of those, please.
Okay. We can break down on the student services. So the colleges put their budgets together. I mean, what we do when you give this presentation is, yes, we do have dollars in the system, but most of what you're seeing when we do a cumulative like that is we take what the colleges have put in their budgets. So, so we'll get that for you. And
is that student success side or on the
association?
Okay.
On the, well, really on both. So we have, on the associations, we have system memberships, and then the colleges all have memberships. And so it's been, we are in the process of gathering all that. I don't, we should have that before the board meeting, by the way. We don't necessarily put the individual, I'm not sure that we, in the budget, you're going to see all of them listed per like that. We have categories of that we put in there for memberships or associations, something like that, professional organizations, and then that may vary from year to year, but we generally know what that is. And so the colleges have a budget for that, and then we have one at the system level. We can get you an overview of what we did in the past pretty quickly so that you can see. We just don't know in the future because I personally eliminated a number of those. After COVID hit, we just were not going to pay anything that didn't make a lot of sense for us. So I'll get you. I'll start getting you some preliminary drafts of what we have. So.
Okay, thank you. I'm interested in specific numbers by college, not the aggregate for the budget.
Okay.
And I'm not on a fishing expedition. I just want to see fill in the blank chamber, fill in the blank economic development group, fill in the blank.
Sure.
And just want to see where the dollars are being spent. It's nothing more than that.
Sure.
Maybe 10,000 at one college, maybe 250 at another. And that's just what I'm looking for. Looking at. And I don't want to get it after the budget because then there'll be no opportunity for me to make recommendations to the trustees.
Okay.
So that's what I'm looking for. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for Jennifer. I guess it's Jennifer. Jennifer, I don't know where this falls for our public relations, but when we're recruiting, and I know I get things in the mail from Lone Star, where does this fall in the student services? Where does this fall, and what kind of budget do we have? Because I see all these brochures and other things that come to my house that I feel I don't have anybody in my household, you know, who's college age or going anywhere. Of course, I'm a grandma, but I'd like to know what we're spending, because I look at this stuff and it's kind of a waste to me that you're sending this to my house and to other people's houses, and it's not even looked at. So what are we spending as far as, that we're putting out all these ads? And because, I would say in my neighborhood, there might be 3 families who get the Chronicle. I'm one of them. And there's a big ad in the Chronicle, and is that free? Are we getting that as are we getting it as some kind of a pro bono? I just like to know, what are we spending with all of the postcards and all of the things that we're sending out? And I think, like Trustee Stoma said, I just want to know, is it benefiting us? That money could be spent elsewhere. I know it's part of recruitment, don't know where it's coming from, but it doesn't seem to be the best way to recruit. I mean, it really doesn't, not to me. So how much money are we spending on items like that, on postcards, on, there was a brochure that, I know there was about 10 or 12 pages that came to my house, that said, about classes being offered. What kind of money are we putting out on this?
I can definitely get for you a detailed budget for the marketing area.
It's marketing. Okay, that's what it is. I'd like to know that, because marketing. I myself put a lot of things in file 13, and I know a lot of other people are doing it too. So, we need to be cautious about how we, our marketing. It's not always in a lot of postcards.
Sure. So I can definitely get that for you. And certainly the August 13th release of the budget detail will show all of our expenditure budget by all of the different departments, marketing being one of them. So I can definitely get that for you.
I'd like, if you can get it to me a little bit earlier. I'm like Trustee Sullivan. I'd like to look at that in case I have recommendations or questions. Thank you.
Yes.
Any further questions, board members? If not, I don't think I need a motion. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. I did want to thank you and fellow trustees for joining the meeting today, and Steve and Jennifer and their team for the thoroughness of the presentation and their willingness and responsiveness in answering questions and listening to our comments. So thanks to everyone involved at Lone Star. It's really helpful to me as a trustee.
Yes. Well, that's well said, Mike. Good job.
Chair Smith, please don't adjourn just yet. I would like to make a comment.
Oh, sure. I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's all right.
Yes.
I want to commend Jennifer and Steve and everybody that worked on this. I think that this budget shows, it evidences hard work, but it also evidences creative, outside the box thinking on how we can move forward in spite of the current circumstances, which at present look like they're going to be our normal for a while. So they employed some very extensive creativity in coming up with ways to solve the problems that we face while continuing to offer the myriad programs that we've committed to, both for our communities and for our students. This budget benefits all of us, and I want to thank them for their very hard work on this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Trustee Good, I agree with you. I've been in this business for 16 years, and it's the best I've seen.
These are extremely challenging times, and
yes,
it's clear to me they have left no stone unturned in how to reduce expenses and how to make the most of available revenue.
Well said.
Thank you.
Going twice? Okay, I think I need a motion, but we're going to switch from okay, good. I just want to make sure. We're going to switch now to convening the special meeting. And as you see at least on the agenda, there is a policy report in consideration dealing with the approval of the order calling trustee election and to appoint staff agent for the board secretary to perform the election duties. And this is the only action item. I would like to have a motion
So
and a
moved.
second to consider that particular item. Thank you, trustee, for moving. A second, please.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and properly second that we consider the item dealing with the trustee election. Any questions, comments? Questions or comments? Let's vote in the usual way by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion passed. And I want to say thank you all for a great meeting. The participation that we received from the trustees and the staff. And keep up the good work. And without any further ado, I will declare the meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
All righty.
Thank you very much, all of you.
Yes, thank you.
Hi, everyone.